my role on the patron working group so far has been I've taken it to kind of reach out and do some research, talk to different schools, see where they're at, what their thoughts are on independence, or schools that may have joined Educate Together, schools that went forward with a vote and decided not to join Educate Together, and schools that have never even thought about what they would do in this scenario. So I suppose to put context on it, the structure of Bray School Project, which I have a chart which I'll show you, but the structure of Bray School Project is not terribly straightforward. But basically, we have the Bray School Project Association, which is a limited company, and the Bray School Project Association is made up of members who pay a membership fee and apply to join the school, and they agree to stay in line with the ethos of the school. They agree with our values of the school, and basically this is not open just to parents, this is open to anybody who agrees with our ethos, so it can be members of the community. So traditionally we would have historical figures involved in setting up the Educate Together movement, the various school projects, and we would have parents who would come in throughout the years and leave, and we have parents who although they have left, they are still very active in the school community. And from the Bray School Project Association is where our structure trickles down. So we've two structures that come from the association. The first one is our trustees. So we have 3 trustees. There's no fixed length of time for a trustee to serve. They serve for as long as they need until they decide to step down. And then we have a council. The council can have up to 20 members. We currently have 6 council members. The council members that we have at the moment are people who would have been very much involved in setting up the school. Now, the role of the council at the moment is quiet. They are there for support when we need them, but it hasn't been required over the last number of years, I suppose during my time anyway. From the council, we then have the executive committee. So these are where the kind of structures start to get active then. The executive committee is responsible for the ethos of the school. So I suppose you'll see from Adrian's presentation how a patron works, but the executive committee would have been set up to run the day-to-day business of the school and do everything in the school. But about 10 years ago, the Department of Education brought in Board of Managements for the school. So since then, a huge chunk of this work has come out of the executive committee and has gone over to the Board of Management. And the Board of Management now carry the burden of the day-to-day responsibilities. And the patron then moved to very much an ethos-driven function. Now, there are more, I suppose, responsibilities on the patron body at the moment because we have a charity regulator who has become a lot more active. So Bray School Project is also a registered charity. So there's been a lot of work on the executive to look into the charitable status of the school. So the Ethos charity, and also they're responsible for the leasehold of school buildings, and in Bray School Project's case, we own this school, so the patron body is the owner of the building. And then from the executive committee, we have our Board of Management, who, as I said, carry out the day-to-day activities and very much the huge bulk of the work in the school. And this would be kind of our most visible body in the school. And we have from the Board of Management, we then have also the PTA. Who can be made up of any amount of parents and teachers who wish to join. So when you take into account all of these different structures, and as it is a bit mind-melting, but when you count up the amount, if we were to fill all of these bodies completely, we'd be needing up to 50 people to actively take part in roles that a lot of them do require expertise. Some of them don't. Some of them just require a will and a willingness to learn and a willingness to work. But you're looking between kind of 30 to 50 people are required to actively take part and run this school. So in the case of Bray School Project, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of people who do multiple roles across the board, who are in PTAs and who are in different committees. And there's also subcommittees from our committees, so it gets even more complicated. We have our patron working group as a subcommittee, we have fundraising committee, we have art day committees, we have the Christmas fair committee, which is one of the most time consuming committees and raises a huge amount of money for the school every year. We've also had a subcommittee that's looked into the ethos of the school. So these, you know, there's a massive amount of work, and parents again are required to take part in that. So for many Educate Together model schools, majority of schools would be larger than ours. So we're quite unusual that we're a single stream school. So we have only our single stream school to draw volunteers from. So that is one thing that through my research it was really clear that that's something we really need to consider. Is, you know, as a school, do we feel we have the people power to carry out this structure? And if not, we need to look at, you know, what an alternative might be. So while I was reaching out to the various different models of schools, there were three that stood out to me, three examples that I thought we could learn a lot from. The first one was Dalkey School Project. So Dalkey School Project would also be a founding school member similar to ourselves. They have a very complicated structure similar to ourselves. And they function very well, and they're happy with their status as independents. So Dalkey School Project would be an example of a school who are just kind of, they're living the model very well, and they're very comfortable with where they're at the moment. One thing to note with Dalkey School Project is, although they're similar to us and they have a small body of schools, they also have Monkstown Educate Together under their patronage, which is huge. So they have a massive people power that goes into their school structure. They also mentioned to me that they have very strong kind of community support. So they're not just drawing from their school body, they're also drawing from the community. They have people who are historically involved in Educate Together, and even our own principal, Carol, is a member of the executive committee in Dalkey School Project. So they have a very wide reach and they have a strong network, and for them this works. Also, their structure is slightly different to ours in that the executive committee is not a one-year term in Dalkey School Project, so they don't have the same amount of turnover. They have longer standing executive committees, so there's greater cohesion with the Board of Management and the other structures because they're on the same time frame. So when I asked them what their thoughts were on independence, they could see there was many benefits to joining Educate Together because of the burden that's placed on the patron body and the executive. But for them, independence works well, and they're carrying on the school. They're quite happy with the way everything is at the moment. They felt that they had historical connection, local school-based knowledge that was very personal and unique to the school, to have people who were on the ground day to day taking part in running their school. They felt that the staff and the committees worked very well together, but for them the pros of remaining independent far outweighed the cons. Another example that I looked at was Sligo School Project, who had been through the process of a vote and they had come out the other side and remained independent. Now they've an interesting story which I won't go into, but as a result of that they had to look at their school structure, and they were also a very small school community, much smaller than ours. There's only 30 children, I think. So they obviously don't have 50 people to go into committees and run different aspects. So what they did was they looked at their school structure and they completely overhauled the structure, so they don't require the same amount of people power. So to me that was another interesting avenue that I think is worth discussing and exploring, even if it's just for kind of a tick box exercise. I think it's something that we should kind of look further into. So hopefully I'll get more information on that and feedback to you. But they now have 4 directors in the school company who run things, and they hand over and they change around, but there aren't multiple committees. And then finally, I talked to North Kildare Educate Together, who had brought this topic for a vote and it had been passed. So I spoke to them about what led to their vote and what kind of factors they had come across. So from their perspective, they felt that as a school they were already very aligned to Educate Together. Many of the people in their school who were running their committees had in fact help set up Educate Together and were very active in the Educate Together movement. They had helped set up the curriculum. So they didn't feel like there was a difference between themselves and Educate Together. They felt very aligned and they felt it was the right thing to do and it was the right time. So they brought the motion forward. There was little resistance from the school body. Everyone was on the same page. The school was very supportive and the process was very smooth. One thing that they did note to us, which I thought was very interesting, is that the process is not straightforward. You don't just hand it over and walk away. The process will take approximately 18 months to 2 years. There is a cost involved in the process and there are people required to help get through the process. So if that is an avenue that the school decides to go down, we still need people to help get through this process. There's a lot of paperwork, and Educate Together have a set of criteria that need to be met before they will consider taking on patronage of the school. And also to note that it's not a given that it's handed over. We apply for patronage to Educate Together. So that was North Kildare Educate Together. So there's a lot to consider there, but you know, three very different models, three very different structures, but all come from the same thing. We all share the same ethos. We all share the same school values. We just have interpreted it differently. So our decision is, you know, what we need to do is look at these different structures and see what we feel fits best for Bray School Project, what works best for our school, for our children, and decide how we can strengthen that and move forward. So that's me.
Thank you.